When I was about 5 years of age, I received a Western Flyer bicycle. This was a full-size, not one of those puny little things with training wheels. My mom thought it was too big for such a little boy, but my dad said I would grow to it and we wouldn't have to worry about my outgrowing the thing. It was a boys-style bike with the bar from the seat to the front bars. This meant that to mount it I had to stand on something. The dismount was usually a crash, and you know it, a mercurochrome treatment for the knees and elbows. Learning to ride that bicycle was no small achievement. I soon learned how to run along beside the bike to get up speed, step from the pedal to the bottom brace, and then throw my leg up high over the rear and pull up onto the seat. The dismount was a similar feat. The right leg was lifted forward between the arms and over the center brace, then while coasting alongside side, jump off and run the bike to a stop. I was proud of that bicycle, but wouldn't you know it, my cousin Aubrey, who lived down the street, suddenly appeared with a brand new Schwinn bicycle. What made the Schwinn such a superior piece of fine machinery was the big shiny chrome spring mounted on the front bracket. I'm sure that at the time I had little appreciation of machined parts versus sheet metal, or the quality of welds, or any other technical bit. But that big shiny spring on the Schwinn, I was assured by Aubrey, meant that it was the best bicycle in the world. Do all kids always think that everyone has something better, or that everyone gets treated better, or that other kids can do something better? I hate to admit it, but I believe this type of thinking was dominant in much of my early life. I hope this is true of most people. I hate to admit to a character fault of this type at such an early age. I will say that now I recognize my abilities, my assets, my heritage, my gifts, and do not covet those who have more or scorn those who have less. One particular memory of riding that bicycle occurred right in front of my house. How many times my mom had said to me, "Be careful and watch for cars." It was such a dumb thing to keep telling me. Of course I was careful, and who could not see something as big as a car? Anyway, I was cruising down the street gazing at something on the sidewalk when I heard a scream. The next thing I know, I am floundering on the hood of a car. The bike is folded on the pavement in front of the car, and the sound of women screaming is ringing in my ears. The little old lady school teacher who lived on the corner had seen me coming up the street. She had slowed the car, and finally brought it to a complete stop as I kept steaming toward her at full speed. I had run full tilt into the car, which was stopped in the middle of the street. A few scratches, a few dents, and a kid who really did watch for cars in the future, running off to Mrs. Fields. During the time that we lived with my grandparents on the farm, I had a close friendship with the big black dog that lived somewhere nearby. I am not sure if he had a name. He was just a big black farm-type dog. His back was about as tall as my shoulders. I was only 3 years old. I would grab around his neck or hold onto his back and follow him everywhere. One afternoon it came to pass that my presence on the premises was missed. A quick search by Mama Doe established that I was nowhere within the 50-yard radius that encompassed the house, barn, and area of the farm. The big search was just starting to move into full swing when the phone rang and Mrs. Fields, the little old lady who lived up the road, called to say that there was a little boy hanging in the bottom strand of her barbed wire fence, and did anyone want to claim him. I had made it about a half-mile, following the big black dog, before my shirt and pants had become hopelessly tangled in the barbed wire fence. I relate this story as told by Mama Doe, for I have no recollection of the event. I don't even remember if I got a switch or not. Hog killing time on the farm. Daddy Doe was primarily a cotton farmer, but had a couple of milk cows, a few pigs, and a flock of chickens. Mama Doe and my mother took care of dispensing with the chickens when a special meal was due, but the hogs were the purview of the family men. My memories are spotty, but here are a few of the scenes that still inhabit the recesses of my brain. A cold, clear day with the smell of working men, steaming water, and dying hogs. Placing the big black cast iron pot on bricks in the backyard. Building a big fire under the pot, which is filled with many buckets of water from the well. Killing the hog. When the water begins to boil, lowering the hog into the boiling water to loose the hair from the skin. Scraping the hair from the skin. Not sure about the butchering, but the ham ended up hanging in the smokehouse at the end of the wooden walk. I still have the big cast iron pot. The thrill of Halloween. When I was a kid, there was no thought of poison candy or kids getting run over by cars. The children were allowed to roam the neighborhood, knocking at all the doors for tricks or treats. Costumes were homemade with the exception of some gauze and rubber masks. The neat thing I remember was that many of the adults would dress up and roam around the streets also. Meeting another 3.5-foot tall ghoul is much different from meeting a Frankenstein monster, twice your height, in the dark spot that exists in the middle of the block, halfway between the little town street lights. Adults should never forget the fleeting magic that Halloween, Christmas, and birthdays have for children. Christmas and Christmas Eve. As a child, I thought that everyone celebrated Christmas in the same way. Christmas Eve afternoon had visits from neighbors and friends and informal gatherings with cookies and Christmas candies. I would hang around the tree, taking every chance to shake the gifts with my name on the cards. It would seem as though it would never get dark. I knew that Santa would not come till it got dark. As it got dark, I started looking for the fat man's arrival. My dad always wanted to go visit Mama Doe, or go look at the neighbor's Christmas tree decorations, or some silly thing that required us to leave the house. Inevitably, this lousy timing on his part would make our return to the house too late. Santa would have arrived, left the gifts, and departed for another year. Christmas morning was just a fresh day to play with the toys that had arrived the night before. It was not till my marriage, the arrival of my own children, that Santa started arriving during my slumbering hours of Christmas Eve. In relating this Christmas procedure, I realized that in those days, we looked at our neighbors' Christmas trees through the front windows of their homes. Everyone set their tree in the front window so it could be seen from the street. Outdoor lighting was rare. I am not sure if this is a function of growing up in a small farm town or if it was just not the thing to do. Shooting matchstick from BB guns at locusts. Another great moment in the life of this child was the gift of a real BB gun. I loved the gun and it loosed all my hunting instincts. The sparrows were terrorized in the whole neighborhood. Across the street at the old Methodist church, the overhanging ledges on the tall 3- or 4-story building made a great nesting place for the resident pigeons. This was a great hunting ground as the pigeons were perceived as pests and were open season. However, the antique stained glass windows were the problem. The thrill of the live game and the risk of the stained glass windows made pigeon hunting a real challenge. Much of the time though was spent out of ammunition. I think after looking back that this was the way that my mom kept my hunting under control. There was not a lot of money for unlimited ammunition, so maybe this was another disciplinary learning time. I, however, learned a trick to extend my hunting even when out BBs. The BB gun shoots air, and when a wooden matchstick is slid down the barrel, it is an effective missile for distances of up to 20 feet. The game? Locusts. They sit in the trees in the summertime and scream at the top of their lungs, sitting just 10 to 15 feet from the ground, clinging to the underside of leaves and limbs. When you manage to stalk within air gun range and make a successful shot, the wooden matchstick spears the large insect as with a wooden arrow. The great thing about hunting insects is that there is no blood, no sense of death or loss, when successful. I remember that when I did manage to bring down one of the large pigeons from the church roof, the sickening feeling as I approached the beautiful wounded bird. This is still true of my attitude today. I am very competitive, have a strong hunting and exploring instinct. I do not like killing animals though. Nightmares and sleepwalking. I had a problem with sleepwalking. This is what I was always told, for I do not remember any of those episodes. When I was caught, out of bed, trying to tour the house or neighborhood, my parents returned me to bed and I never remembered a thing. Walking out the front door or crawling out the screen window or sleeping under the bed or sleeping in the closet or wetting down the corner of the bathroom and wetting down the closet, these were all part of my nighttime tours. Maybe sleepwalking was a way to get away from those terrible nightmares. Probably all kids have nightmares. I'm sure psychologists have all the answers to why kids wake up in real states of raw terror. I remember the many nights waking up to my own screams, and the instant comfort and assurance that there was nothing to be afraid of. There were two of those nightmare dreams that I remember even now. They were of the recurring type, and after a while the terror was familiar and I knew that it was really just a dream. As I walked through the front yard, there was a deep dark hole near the front sidewalk. I always seemed to fall into the hole, and as I fell toward the bottom, something waiting there for me would come into view. I think it was a wolf, but as I had learned that this was just a dream, as I neared the bottom, I knew all I had to do was wake up to save myself. I think that in the years that have passed I have heard variations of this dream from many people, so I feel that there was no particular significance to the wolf hole. The other recurring dream was, however, harder to describe and was less like a dream. As I lay in the bed, the dark would seem to grow. There would seem to be tiny light specks that would come toward me and then shoot past. It was a little like the Star Trek introduction as the Enterprise is shooting into space. Instead of being exhilarating though, it was as if I was being swallowed up by nothingness. It was more as if I was shrinking away into non-existence or death. I have actually had this feeling upon occasion in later life. It may be that this is not a dream, but a state of mind that comes over you as you lay still in the dark. Fear of death? Childhood dogs. I had many dogs as a kid. Fences were not big in a small town, and dogs were free to roam. My dogs, unfortunately, liked to chase cars. The only one that I had long enough to remember was Poochie. He was a part collie of semi-large stature and loving disposition. Mostly white with medium-long fur and a couple of brown spots. Like the others though, he would follow me to school, then wander his way home to pass the day. One day he didn't make it back across the highway. As I returned from school that afternoon, I saw him lying in the gutter, a mass of blood and dirt on his white fur. I ran home crying to tell Mom that my Poochie had been run over and killed. She got in the car and returned to the highway to take care of the body. He was gone. I really loved him, so did Mom, but we were not surprised. Dad had already backed over him once while he slept under the car in the gravel driveway. He had only survived this long, because he seemed to be able to survive being hit or run over by cars. A day went by, maybe two, when we heard something strange coming from behind the great sticky shrub that covered half the front of the house. I was elected to crawl behind the sticking barrier to find the source of the stirrings and noises. To my amazement, there lay Poochie, in a nest of dirt, licking his wounds, healing himself the way nature intended. We brought water and food each day, half expecting him to be dead each morning. For several days he would not eat, just drink. Finally, he emerged, a little crippled, but alive and loving as ever. In those days, we never bought a bag of commercial dog food, and there was no thought of taking him to a veterinarian. Seems cruel now, but it was just normal back then. Well, as you might expect, chasing cars was still his demise. I don't recollect the specifics, but he did not pass from old age. Screen windows and summer night sounds. We had no air conditioning till I was about 14. We were not underprivileged, it was just a relatively new thing. My dad was working for Westinghouse and he brought home a window unit to install in his and Mom's bedroom. A little of the cool air would blow down the long hall and into my room, when their bedroom door was open. Living in a house with the doors and windows closed and the hum of an air conditioner seals off the outside world. It created an isolation that we now take for granted. Only when you go out camping and find you have trouble sleeping because of the night noises do you appreciate the difference. Back in 1946 BAC, before air conditioning, you could lay in bed on a summer night and hear all kinds of things. The locusts screeching, the tree frogs chirping, the crickets clicking, the neighbors talking, the leaves rustling in the trees, the tree limb rubbing on the house gutters. We were living closer to nature then. You sweated when it was hot, You wore lots of clothes when it was cold.